Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. Yes, we are live. We never stop. It doesn't matter what the result is. We will be here at 12:30 on a Monday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen McCutcheon of Celtic Down Under. Stephen, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Obviously had better weekends, but as Ange says, we never stop.
We never stop. And by the way, just to cheer everybody up, I thought I would introduce to you a jersey that it's an anomaly in the Celtic jersey history. I knew you were going to be coming on with some of the classics behind you, and I thought I'd go the other way because there's no way I'm going to match the old shamrock top from the 1960s.
Yeah.
But the reason I've got it there before we get started is I've been looking for this jersey. I'm a bit of a completist, a bit of an obsessive. Been looking for this jersey for ages, and it was our very own Lloyd Patrick Jepson who sent it up to the studio. Not only that, it's a player spec kit. It's long sleeved. I'm going to wear it on my holiday this summer. Why not, Stephen? Why not? There has been a couple of shirts leaked over the last few weeks. We'll be talking about them, but there is so much to talk about in relation to that game over the weekend, Stephen. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts, and I'm keen to hear the thoughts of the commenters in the chat group as well. We normally go about 1,000 strong on a Monday. Hopefully you can all join us. Let us know what you think. We're going to be talking about specific areas of that match. We're going to be talking about lineup changes that didn't work. The three mistakes that cost us the game ultimately. Yeah, it was a bad result, but there were three individual errors that could have been avoided. The lockout, how does it affect the atmosphere of the game? How does it affect the visiting teams? And of course, we'll be talking about the fact that more missiles were thrown onto the park in the direction of Matt O'Reilly and Jota. Bragging rights. Have a look at the tagline. We've been getting told that Rangers have got the bragging rights over the summer. Seriously? I think that Ange has got bigger expectations of what we can take into the summer months. And what did Ange learn from the game? Things weren't good. What did he learn from the Glasgow Derby defeat? And is there ever such a thing as a meaningless Glasgow derby? I'm going to be asking Stephen those questions and loads more as well as the big refereeing decisions. Did he get them right? Did he get them wrong? Let's start off then, Stephen. Give me an overview of that performance at the weekend, how you watched it over in Australia, and your summary of the 3-0 defeat.
Yeah, well, it was on at a very respectable 9:30 p.m. on a Saturday night, which is just perfect for us on the east coast of Australia. I'm here in Sydney, so it was good from that point of view. So I went out to the pub down at the Scruffy Murphy's down in the city where the Sydney CSC gathered to watch the games. Myself and my son went down there, so it's always nice to watch the games with my son. I was actually out already celebrating my daughter's birthday. So we managed to sneak away, but we missed the first 15 minutes of the game. So I kind of watched, the first goal on my phone. And by the time I got to the pub, the atmosphere was already a bit subdued. It was really quite a weird one because, there was so little at stake for Celtic in terms of, points and anything meaningful to play for. But at the end of the day, you're still playing them and you still don't like to lose. The game was very disappointing for a number of reasons we'll probably get into soon. But it was just very disappointing from start to finish. And I don't think there was many positives at all we could take out of that game, to be honest.
It's a bit like this jersey behind me as well, Stephen. Not many positives we can take away from that. Who could you put that on? Could Jota even make that jersey look good? I'm not so sure. We'll also be looking at some of the players who got pass marks. I mean, we try and pull as many positives as possible. And I understand the emotion of being in the game, watching the game. At that time, it's very difficult. And for my sins, I rewatched the game this morning so that I could give more of a balanced view of it. I was looking at things like which players, in amongst that terrible performance, because that's what it was. Were there any players who came out with pass marks? I'll be talking about that. I'll also be looking at a few other points. Today marks the anniversary of the passing of two absolute legends of the club, Stephen. Let's have a wee chat about that as well before we get stuck into the Rangers game. Bobby Murdoch passed away on this day in 2001, and Tommy Burns passed away also in 2008 on this day. And every year we talk about it, I'm always taken aback by their ages, because every year I'm getting closer to the ages that they were when they passed away. Young men, Stephen. Bobby Murdoch, 56. Tommy Bond's just 51. And it's always right at this time of the year to remember these two legends.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, Bobby Murdoch, be before my time. I wouldn't have any memory of watching Bobby Murdoch, but clearly a legend of the club. One of the a member of the best team we ever fielded. But Tommy Burns for me just signifies everything that was Celtic growing up around about the club. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm past the age Tommy was when he passed away, and he was one of those guys you thought would be around forever. First a player, then a manager, and you just sort of the guy you expected to grow old within the club. But to lose him at that time, absolutely tragic, and a fantastic man, as well as being a Celtic legend.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've seen these players. It's they're synonymous with the club that you've grown up with, and you do hope that they have a long and fruitful life beyond the football. And when you look at the ages 56, 51, thoughts and prayers as always with Bobby's and Tommy's friends and family on this particular day. What I'm also going to be pointing out, looking at positives, is the chances we had, Stephen, at the weekend where, on another day, one of the chances pulls us back into the game. It wasn't to be. We'll be looking at all of that. Starting off, the lineup changes that didn't work. Now, I'm not talking about Kobayashi and I'm not talking about Ralston here because they were forced changes. Johnston and Carter Vickers are injured. We've seen both of them on crutches. Nothing you can do about that when you're the gaffer, but he did decide to make some other changes. So we're looking at O starting the game up top, Bernabe starting at left back, and the decision to bring back Abada at the loss of Maeda, I thought was an interesting move as well. We'll start off with O then, right? And Lawrence and I we disagreed on it, simple as that, which is fair play. That's what it's all about. We disagreed on this one. I'd play Kyogo every single day of the week. And when we go into this game, I think it's a no-brainer. I think, Kyogo's the top goal scorer in the country. He's picked up gongs last night that we'll be talking about for his incredible season. And Lawrence, he wouldn't mind me saying this, and he'll be back on tomorrow to talk about it. Lawrence's point was, what are you going to learn from Kyogo in a game like this game on Saturday? Well, my view is it's not about learning. It's about winning, or certainly avoiding defeat, keeping up your own personal records, going for the points tally, going for the goals tally, keeping in the momentum going as well, Stephen, for the cup final. And just, treating this game like you would treat the game if it was 2 weeks ago and we hadn't won the league. Go in with your strongest side. And when I look at O had a great chance. He had a fantastic chance to score the equaliser. In 6 minutes, it would have been a brilliant response. The whole dynamic of the game changes. Was it a bad effort? No, it was a fairly good effort, and it clips the post. But I'm looking at Kyogo, and I just think a guy like Kyogo's got to start, and he's got a great record against Rangers as well. So we'll start off with O. Were you surprised at the change? Did you agree with it, Stephen? What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I was surprised at the amount of changes. I think Ange has been pretty much flawless in his time at the club, but I think he got it wrong on the weekend there, and we have to be able to say that. As far as O's concerned, no, I wasn't expecting him to start the game. I understand the point that you want to give him game time in fixtures which are essentially meaningless, but this one's never meaningless. And to go into that stadium in front of no Celtic fans, with that whole stadium baying for blood, I think it was just too much for a guy who's only been playing for the team since the January window, and it's still to really get a significant amount of minutes under his belt. And I think it was always going to be a big ask, both for him and the other guys coming into the team. And the chance you were talking about, I might disagree slightly. I thought he made a bit of a mess of it, because if I watched it back like you today, and the Rangers goalkeeper McCrory actually slipped over as he advanced out towards the ball, and that was the point then to just dink it over him into the net. But he just delayed that split second to let McCrory get back to his feet, narrow the angle, and he was a bit unlucky to hit the post. But if he'd been more decisive in the first place, I think he'd have put it away. And for the rest of the game, I just don't think he did enough, and he didn't appear to be putting the work rate in that you get from Kyogo. And Kyogo's been the best striker in the country this year, and you take him out of the team, there's always going to be a drop-off in quality. But I think it was just a bridge too far for O. I'd be quite happy to see him playing in the remaining 3 games of the season, but just not in that one.
I think it's a good point you make there, because, listen, I'm not about to write any of these guys off, Stephen, because, you know, there are reactions, and I get that. The emotions are running high during the game, after the game. And I've heard a lot of chat around Bernabei, so I was watching his performance really closely second time round. And I'm not writing O off, and I've heard people saying, you know, it's a downgrade on Giakoumakis and all that kind of stuff. Listen, let's give him time and we'll see how he develops. But what I will say about it is I don't think after that chance there was a great deal that he contributed. And listen, people might say the same, that when Kyogo came on, he didn't make a great difference. However, when a game's going against you and you come on in 62 minutes and it's 2-0, Rangers are in a lane, Celtic are in a completely different lane, it's hard to then get back into the game. But what I would say is within 4 minutes, there were 2 balls played through to Kyogo by Hatate that, you know what, if they're in the first 4 minutes, say the first or the second half, then, you know, you're looking at Kyogo thinking, right, see the third pass, he's going to get on the end of it. There were through balls by Hatate. I never saw that danger. I never saw the off-the-ball running that Kyogo brings to the game. I never saw that from O. So I didn't agree with it. I thought that it weakened our side. And it's not just about the goals. We're talking about him being the top goal scorer. But it's the way that the movement. It's the movement off the ball. It's the way that everybody talks about him hanging off the shoulder of the last defender. There's a few occasions where the goalie's got far too much time for me. Kyogo's normally right down the throat. So, yeah, I thought that was a mistake. And this is the thing, right? Ange Postecoglou came to Celtic, lost 3 of his first 6 games. And, you know, we were able at that point to say that was wrong and this was wrong. He then goes on an incredible journey with us as fans, Stephen, and he deserves all the plaudits that he gets. And by the way, we'll come to his post-match interview as well. But it's okay to say that, you know, that a decision was wrong. It's not, we're not at the point where you just cannot question something that the gaffer does. And I think that we were in a same scenario, actually, in Neil Lennon's final season, where any criticism of Lennon for several weeks and months on this show was criticised in itself, because you can't criticise the gaffer. And it was all about, back then, keep the faith in Lenny we trust. That's all fair and well. But when you see things that aren't going well, I think it's okay to highlight them. And I think O's performance at the weekend was a mistake by Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, and it was very surprising because we've only lost one other game this season, and that was away to St Mirren. And it was the same scenario there. He made too many changes for that game, and everybody basically recognised that. And he's never done it since. And to do it again in a game of this magnitude was really quite surprising, especially since you mentioned earlier there was 2 forced changes already through injury. And I think, you know, the amount of changes that were made to the other positions just threw the balance of the team out completely. And certainly, you know, asking O to lead the line like that was really a big ask for him. And I hope he bounces back, and I hope he, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing him getting a lot more minutes between now and the end of the season. Maybe off the bench. I'd be starting Kyogo for the remaining games if he's fit. But, you know, I'd be quite happy to see O get some minutes under the belt. I think he's got a lot of potential there. The goal he scored at Tynecastle was a very good goal.
Yeah, and at a good time as well.
And it was a great run off the defender, and I think that was a sign of things to come. And that he's maybe not just a sort of physical centre forward that he's been kind of used as up to now. But I think, you know, moving into the summer transfer window, I think there's definitely room, and I know this is opening up a whole other discussion, but there's probably room for another striker to come in and you know, put the pressure on, a bit more pressure on Kyogo and O to keep the performance levels up.
I would agree with that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of talk between now and the end of the season and then through the pre-season as to where we strengthen, where we really need to strengthen in the side. I've been saying for a wee while, I think that a striker is required. Even the fact, you know, if O was even more prolific than it has been, and I think he's done okay since he came in, I just think that you've got to have 3, because if someone does get injured, you know, then you've got no option. You've got to play the only player that's fit. So let's bring in another striker. By the way, if you've just joined us and you're thinking, why on earth has Paul John got that jersey behind him. The reason I've got it there is because if you think the jerseys behind Stephen are better than mine, give us a big thumbs up on YouTube. And I'm pretty sure that the 700 of you that are watching right now will give us a big thumbs up. Right, Bernabe. So he comes back in. And again, the discussion that Lawrence and I had yesterday was around, well, at some point, Stephen, these guys are going to have to face not just Rangers, but they're going to have to face European sides. If we want to be a European force in ourselves, they're going to have to, go into a challenge like this and come through with flying colours. It's something Ange spoke about, and one player this season who's gone into a game like this before is Alistair Johnston, and he came through it with flying colours. Bernabe is getting loads of stick. I've noticed it on the socials. I've noticed it in the comments. Loads of stick he's getting. I watched it again today. I felt it was pretty disjointed, his performance. I don't think he would... Listen, there was plenty of people who weren't performing on that park. But at one point, just to back up the disjointed kind of view, in 29 minutes, he chases a ball, right, kind of takes himself out of position. The ball is obviously going into the space of Matt O'Reilly. Now, Greg Taylor would have left it for O'Reilly. They end up barging into each other. It's almost as if O'Reilly tackles him, and we lose possession. And it was just very disjointed, as if he's not really into the flow of how we play. And I felt also that down the left-hand side, we were very weak. Now, that came from the defence, Kobayashi, Bernabe on the left-hand side, and then defensively, Jota on the left. Now, actually, I think Jota played pretty well, but defensively, he's not Maeda. So I felt down the left-hand side, we were really weak, and it really, I thought, exposed Bernabe, who didn't have a great game. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought, feeling watching it at the time, he did appear to be having a pretty poor game. Some of his passing was fairly inaccurate, and he just didn't seem to be getting the positional part of the game that Greg Taylor fulfills so well, like joining into the midfield. And I think that had a lot to do with the problems we ended up having in midfield. Bernabe just wasn't in the correct area of the pitch too often. Wasn't helped by the fact the whole left side of the team was a new combination, as was the whole right side of the team. So that didn't help matters at all. But I think he had a pretty poor game. And I think what's going against Bernabe and what a lot of people seem to be forgetting is we paid quite a lot of money for him. It was just short of £4 million, which is a significant investment for Celtic. And I think when we brought him in, I know I certainly expected him to be first choice left back. Now, Greg Taylor surpassed everyone's expectations this year and had a fantastic season. So we've been fortunate in that regard because Bernabe's just not showed that he's up to the level of being a first-team starter yet. And for having paid that amount of money for him, I think that's pretty disappointing from him.
I remember, and we could go back on the shows, I think a lot of people had that view, Stephen, about Bernabe coming in. We're talking about we need an upgrade for Europe. I remember all that chat. But then what's happened is Greg Taylor has really, for me, he's developed probably beyond many of our expectations. There were a few Acsom contributors, Amy Canavan, Lawrence Connolly, who have always been big fans of Greg Taylor, and there's a few others as well. But there was a lot of folk actually disagreeing with those views. And I think you make a fantastic point there. If you look at the combinations down both sides, that's another reason why you play Taylor at left back, you play Jota on the right-hand side, you play Maeda down. Because if you don't do that, you've got a second choice right back who doesn't really have an understanding with those in front of him, and you've got a second choice left back who doesn't have that understanding. And then you've got that disjointed look about it. The other player, people might disagree with this and maybe go back to Abada's record against Rangers, Stephen, but Abada came back in at the loss of Maeda. And I said going up to the game, I think against Rangers, Maeda's got to start. He's got to start. I think he snuffs out a potential threat down their right-hand side. His work rate, we know all about it. We've spoken about it for a year and a half now. And again, you're looking at Abada, you think to yourself, right, okay, he scores goals against Rangers. He gives them a hard time. And in actual fact, he probably should score about 15 minutes in as well. So again, it didn't quite work out, and it's not with hindsight, because going into the game, I said we should play Maeda. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, you've always got to play Maeda in this fixture because he nullifies their main threat, which is that, basically Tavernier coming down the right-hand side of their team and swinging in crosses and trying to play off second balls. So Maeda just nullifies that, and his work rate's just so incredibly good and incredibly what a rate he keeps up, and that's what you need. That's what you need over at Ibrox when you're playing in an away fixture, especially with no fans there. You just need somebody to keep them in their own half, and it was totally the midfield was totally disjointed because the fullbacks weren't pushing in properly, and as far as Abad is concerned, I just don't understand that one at all because he's been out the team for a long time now, but we know what he's capable of. We know Abada can score goals. We know he can get in at the back post and get on the end of things. So there's nothing for us to learn from that. We know he can do that. It's not like Kobayashi, who we need to see if he can handle these sort of fixtures. We know Abada can, but he's been out the team for so long, and it was just too much to ask for him to come straight back in like that. And another one that was a real head scratcher for me.
You know this, Stephen, right? And again, this is listen, we've just been beaten 3-0 from Rangers. There's going to be some criticism, but this isn't us forgetting all the good that this team have done. I mean, Ange Postecoglou has been a revelation. Most of the players that we're talking about today have been fantastic signings. But in isolation, we're talking about this particular game. And I want to talk about some of the mistakes that were made because, individual errors are so costly in any game. But in a game like this, you can look back on the 3 goals and they were completely unavoidable. Sometimes, I said it, when Tavernier scored that free kick, I said, listen, sometimes it's just a great goal. I thought it was a brilliant goal. And others in the comments said, Joe Hart should have got it, except it wasn't quite postage stamp. I thought it was a great free kick. And sometimes you've just got to hold your hands up and say that was a fantastic effort. But those 3 goals that we conceded at the weekend are so frustrating to watch back because you're looking at the first one, the opener, and I'm thinking to myself, Joe Hart, who has been a sensational signing for Celtic, I love his leadership qualities. I think he's been brilliant for the team. If you're going to stop that and no catch it, don't put it into the danger area. And that's exactly what he's done. But in putting it into the danger area, what you're hoping for is you're hoping for a quicker reaction by Kobayashi at that stage. And you just don't get it. I think he's slow to react. The second goal, and by the way, this is an opportunity to get stuck in about Kobayashi because he's going to be playing in the cup final, and I don't want to criticise him too much. He needs to be stronger when Suter wins that header, and I know some people have suggested that there was a foul there. I was watching it back closely this morning. Kobayashi's got a hold of Suter's jersey as well. I think if that is called as a foul against you, you're frustrated. So I just think he needs to be stronger. He ends up on the deck. He ends up on his backside. And that third goal, not by any means Kobayashi's fault because McGregor and Starfelt was a mix-up. It's a classic mix-up. Starfelt was one of the best players in the park for me. McGregor's captain invincible. He's been superb. However, see when you watch it back from the other angle, right? Kobayashi takes an age to react to the mishap. And all you're looking for is him to get behind Hart. Hart pushes the boy out wide. And then you've maybe got a chance with Kobayashi standing in the goal to knock it back for a corner. So all 3 goals completely unavoidable, Stephen. Completely avoidable, rather.
Yeah, definitely. As far as the first goal is concerned, if you're a defender, especially one making their debut at Ibrox against Rangers, the one thing you've got to do is stay switched on. You've got to stay switched on, especially early in the game, and he just switched off. And he was, a split second, and Cantwell was in behind him. And I agree with you, it was, pretty ordinary from Joe Hart. It was a decent shot, but he should have got it away from the danger area. That's for sure. As far as the second goal goes, I flagged some concerns on our pod about the way Kobayashi was physically bullied last week at Tynecastle by Ginnelly and by Shankland. They were both taking turns to push him around. And those guys are by no means world beaters, but they gave him a bit of a torrid time of it. I didn't think he had a great game against Hearts at all. So probably didn't surprise me that he got bullied by Suter in the box. But you're right. He's got to be stronger. He's got to be physically stronger in that situation. And you mentioned that he'll be playing in the cup final. I'm not sure if there's an argument for looking at Stephen Welsh. I'm not Stephen Welsh's biggest fan. I think he's short for the level that we require, but I don't think he'd have got bullied off John Suter like that. I think he'd have been physically stronger in that situation. So maybe that's something for Ange to think about. And the third goal, yeah, you're right again, because when Sakala goes round the goalkeeper, he takes a poor touch. Mm-hmm. He's taken it wide, and he's touched to divert it towards goal. He's rolled his foot over the ball a little bit, and it's trundled just inside the post. So he almost missed it again. And if someone had got back in the line, they'd have had an excellent chance to clear it. But how funny would that have been if he'd rolled that past the post?
Into the side net.
Given what's happened.
I know, absolutely. That's an interesting point about Welsh, because I think anyone who's been tuning into Acsom for a while will know that I have championed Stephen Welsh. I just, the way his career's gone at Celtic, you can kind of see that he doesn't have a future. Certainly under Ange, he's not going to have a future here. It's an interesting suggestion, because you've kind of, or I certainly have kind of written him off, and we're going to be asking, what have you learned from this game? Well, Kobayashi, the only way he's going to learn about these deficiencies by playing games. But I don't think a game against Rangers is when you learn. I don't think a cup final's when you learn. And Stephen Welsh, he has played in cup finals for Celtic, and he's played plenty of games for the club. Yeah, it's unfortunate for him that his career has kind of gone and nosedived a wee bit under Ange, particularly when you look at the first game of this season. He opens the scoring for us this season against Aberdeen, played pretty well, and he's out the team the following week. But it will be interesting to see, because I don't even think he was on the bench, was he, at the weekend? I'd need to check that. Let me have a wee look.
I see somebody's in the comments saying he might be injured, so
he wasn't on the bench.
Yeah, I might be, I might be off the mark there, but definitely. And look, before anybody jumps down my throat, I'm not suggesting Stephen Welsh is the future centre half for Celtic. We need much, much better than that. I'm just saying, if Ange's been fair enough about, competition for places and all that, then, Stephen Welsh should, after that performance by Kobayashi, I think Welsh should be in with a shout at least.
Yeah, but I just checked the bench there, and perhaps there is an injury, because he certainly wasn't on the bench. Jungle Lion, welcome to the show. No matter what happens at the weekend, we will be here to talk about it, and we're heading towards 800 live on the live stream. If you've just joined us and wondering why this monstrosity is behind me on the mannequin, it's so bad that I like it. But if you think that the jerseys behind Stephen are better, the famous Shamrock jersey, and also the stripes, is that the one that's also got the harp on it as well? I think
it is. Yeah, that's the one.
Yep. The harp, the Free State, that jersey and the Shamrock, fantastic designs. Not so much this one. If you think Stephen's got better jerseys than me, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Jungle Lion, French players are French players for a reason. I think we had kind of been led into a situation, Stephen, where we thought the French players were great. We maybe had 16 or 18 of a squad that, could be called upon and contribute. What we've seen at the weekend is if we're 4 first picks down, our team is completely different. It's not flowing. It's not as fluid as we're used to. The quality certainly isn't there. And if you look at the fact that the defence is something that we've built our success on, that was a brand new defence who had never played together before. And it was a weak defence, like you say there, Kobayashi getting bullied. We can't get bullied from John Souttar, who's probably played a handful of games since he signed for Rangers. And then up top, we just don't have the same impact from Mo. Stephen Sloan, that's gave them a huge confidence boost going into next season. And they think they have our card mark now. Yeah, they probably do, Stephen, they probably do. And I think there's probably going to be a narrative around that as well that, probably motivated me to write that tagline, Summer Bragging Rights. Unbelievable, because, it's one game and we have won or a double. We're going for a treble. Michael McDonald, I'm bummed the team, this is great because this is Happy Mondays. I'm bummed the team were a loose fit on Saturday with CCV out. When we play our strongest first team for the important games, Bob's your uncle and a treble is ours. Happy Mondays and Sundays shall return. I love a bit of Happy Mondays, Michael, so thank you very much for that. And I've also just seen that I've written Summer Bragging Right. I need to change that to rights. Okay. Now, the lockout, obviously, the allocation changes, Stephen, massive, massive discussion points. I think it affects the atmosphere. I thought that atmosphere was really flat at the weekend. What was your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. It's not much of a spectacle, is it, really? And it seems to be much worse at Ibrox. Obviously, we're a little bit biased at Celtic Park. I thought the atmosphere was great in some of the games where we had 100% of the fans at our place. But it was flat at Ibrox, and I don't know whether that was because, again, the nature of the game, a dead rubber, not much at stake, and they everything's already been decided in terms of the league championship. But it does make a difference, and it's something that needs to be resolved. Obviously, it's only Rangers that can resolve it. They're the ones that need to move their position towards getting away fans back in the grounds again in a safe manner, because I've never been to Ibrox with 800 fans. In the days when I used to go to Ibrox, it was 8,000 of us there, so it was safety in numbers. And I can only imagine how scary it would be to go with 800 fans there. So we need to get back to a situation where there's at least a few thousand away fans at these games, and I'd be happy to see them getting a few thousand tickets for Celtic Park as well, because it definitely improves the spectacle.
You know this, I was watching it and I just thought there was a gala atmosphere. It was like there was a moment where Raskin kicks the ball and slices it out of the park, and the Rangers fans applauded it. And I'm just thinking, this sounds like the cricket, where you can actually hear everybody. It just, for me, the atmosphere wasn't there. And I've been to Ibrox and the free broom loan when we had the full allocation there, and the atmosphere is electric. And like you say, it's safety in numbers, and you just hope that the goal gets scored in front of you, and inevitably the player ends up in the crowd. Everybody done that from Cascarino to Samaras. And then, I've been at games at Celtic Park where, and I've described the view of the Rangers fans celebrating as like a box of worms, if they score a goal and everybody's just gone wild from a distance. And I've also been at Celtic Park when there's been no Rangers fans, and I thought the atmosphere was electric as well. But at the weekend there, definitely no atmosphere to speak of. And of course, I wasn't in the stadium. You also spoke about safety, the whole genesis of this issue, and the fact that Celtic have gone to them and said, listen, our fans are not safe in your stadium, therefore we don't want your tickets for Ibrox and you're not coming to Celtic Park. There were more missiles thrown in the park, Stephen. Matt O'Reilly and Jota in their direction. They didn't get hit, but they're picking up what looked like lighters and coins. They're passing them to the ref, who's passing them to the fourth official, who's passing them to the security officer. And that kind of thing, we've spoken about the safety aspect of our fans or staff, the referees who have received threats, and also the players. And it continues. And it's one of these things that's almost a footnote. If that doesn't really get a mention, it's just like, just move them off the park so we can get the game going again. But this is the same stadium and the same fan base who had broken glass in Joe Hart's goalmouth. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be highlighted. And inevitably, it needs to be sorted out.
Yeah, there seems to be a total media silence on it. It was another serious incident which could have ended up with a player being injured. And off the back of the things we've seen that you mentioned there, with broken glass, with the Celtic physio needing medical treatment after getting hit in the head with something, and with players being attacked on the pitch, when Scott Brown was attacked a couple of years back. So these guys are serial offenders for this. And in any other country, I think they'd be looking at least a partial ground closure on the back of this happening again and again and again. And sadly, it's not the media that are going to drive it in this country. It's up to Celtic as a club. And I think Celtic have got a duty of care to protect their own employees in this. And I hope they're raising this with the SFA or the SPFL and making sure that appropriate measures are put in place. I did have concerns about this game, and it was probably, the concerns would have been a little bit allayed by the fact that Rangers won the game. But if Celtic had won that game, there'd have been all sorts going on for sure. And I get no confidence that our players and staff would have got out there in good health if we had won that game.
Well, here's something for you then, Stephen, to consider, and for the wider fan base, right? So in games like this previously, what has happened is the match commander, who's the highest ranking police officer in the stadium, has spoken to both teams. And they've spoken to both teams with regards to an expectation of their conduct on the park. So, for example, and I wasn't party to this, you could imagine, and I said this leading up to the game, that part of that discussion would be how Celtic treat scoring a goal. And we spoke all week about how do you celebrate a goal in that environment? What do you do? And it's the do's and don'ts. Don't run up, don't antagonise, don't incite this, that and the other. That's their focus, right? What the focus should be on is what to do with missiles once they're thrown on the park. Because what happens is a player picks it up, passes it to the ref, who passes it to the fourth official, who then passes it to the security officer. contaminating whatever has been thrown on the park. So there's no evidence to be gained from it. It's easy to find out who's thrown it because either DNA on a bottle or fingerprints on something like a lighter are easy to get off of that. So it shows the priorities, doesn't it? Don't antagonise a fan base because something bad might happen. But if they throw something on the park, just get it off as soon as possible. Don't worry about the evidence that might actually be on that item. And I think that's something that the club need to raise with the authorities because, again, it's going to continue. And as you say, if we had won 3-0 at the weekend, who knows what might have happened at the end of that, Stephen. Unfortunately, we are talking about a 3-0 defeat. And at the end of the game, on Sky Sports, it was claimed, and I've got the tagline right this time, it was claimed that Rangers have the bragging rights through the summer. This was definitely a bad day at the office. But I'll tell you something, with regards to the game, I think there's loads to learn from it. I think we've spoken about some of that today, Stephen. But I also think that Ange knows we need to be bigger than having just parochial bragging rights, because our motivation, our ambitions have to be bigger than that. And again, with regards to it, if that is all that they're living for, it shows a kind of, for me, a small club mentality. We've got to be bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bragging rights comment was from Ailey Barber on the Sky coverage. And to be fair, Ailey's normally a half-decent commentator on the games. But it was a really stupid thing to say. And I think if she'd had her time over again, she would think about saying something completely different, because it's a piece of nonsense how anybody can suggest that a club who's won 0 trophies this year and been schooled by their biggest competitors at least 4 times already, knocked out of both cups. And we are now looking at a domestic treble possibly in a few weeks' time. So to say that's giving anyone bragging rights over the summer is just a preposterous comment. And I think the fact that Ange felt he was able to rest so many players in this game sort of tells us how we see them. We don't really see them as a major threat. And I don't think, there's nothing, although they won the game fairly comfortably, and, credit to them for that. But I don't see there's anything much to worry about from them.
You're right. And I think that it was one of the comments. It's out, it's live telly. And if you could rewind time and delete it from history, you certainly would do. Patrick Harold, welcome to the show. You need to fight in every game, mate. I totally agree with that. And going into it, it's not a meaningless game in terms of what that does for title aspirations. It does nothing because the title's over, but definitely not a meaningless game. Now, Paddy, that third kit looks rank rotten. I hope you're talking about this thing behind me, because I do agree with you, but strangely enough, I've grown to love it in a strange way. And basically it's there because Stephen's on the show. He's got some quality kits. If you think Stephen's are better than mine, give me a thumbs up on the YouTube channel. And I think what we'll do with this one, right, as well as wearing it on holiday, just for the bants, is get it signed with as many Celtic players as possible, because we do a lot of live gigs. And Blah Boy is asking, when is a live show coming to Ireland? We would absolutely love to come to Ireland. We've never done it. Acsom has never done a live show in Ireland. So anyone out there who is involved in a CSC or knows a good venue and you want us to come along and bring a player or two, give us a DM, give us an email, and we'll certainly come along. Michael Ross says we don't need a third kit. I agree with that. And we certainly don't need a fourth kit either, Michael, but that is where we're going. And there's been a few leaks that we'll talk about once we're finished with this game here. What do you think Ange learned from that then? Because we know the saying that you learn more in adversity than you do in success. I thought, if you're taking any learning, I actually thought after the second batch of subs, we contained them better, but the sting was out of the game by then. They had kind of switched off, they'd won the game. We can't cope with losing 4 key players. I think that's a massive learning point. And by the way, on the back of that, if we do lose 1 or 2 this summer, and I don't mean fringe players like Stephen Welsh or James McCarthy, who we probably expect to leave, or any of the loanees like Barkas, etc., who we expect to leave. If we lose key players, then the quality that comes in has to be as good as. I mean, I'm not loath to call players projects. I think we have done that in the past, Stephen, but we can't be losing one of our key players and then bringing someone in who's a drop in quality this summer.
No, absolutely not. I think one of the points that came out of our Champions League campaign earlier on in the year, which was ultimately a disappointing one, was that the drop off between our first and second choice in mostly every position is too much, and that was something I think we were going to have to bridge. And I think what Ange has probably learned from this game is that we haven't quite bridged that yet, and there's still far too much of a drop off. For instance, between Kyogo and O, and between Cameron Carter-Vickers and Kobayashi, between Taylor and Bernabe, and most particularly between Alistair Johnson and Anthony Ralston. And if we are serious about having a crack at the Champions League next season, then that's something they're going to have to address over the summer. And yet, not with projects. We've got money to spend. We should be able to invest some serious sums of money in transfer fees and bring in some real quality. In some cases, not only to compete, but to replace guys in the first team and keep them on their toes as well. I mean, Greg Taylor's a prime example. For me, he's had a great season, absolutely brilliant. Could potentially have been Player of the Year, but could we do better? Possibly if we'd done a left-footed Alistair Johnson, he might keep Greg Taylor out the team, if you know what I mean. So we have to just keep, pushing the quality of the signings as much as we can, and try and make sure, as if we lose Cameron Carter-Vickers for a game or two of the Champions League that we did this year, that the drop-off's not as steep to someone like Maurice Jens, who just didn't cut it when it mattered.
No, this is the concern. This is definitely a concern. I mean, we've seen the second choice players, or the second stringers as they're sometimes known, and that is Ralston and it's Bernabe and it's O, and you're thinking, well, listen, they weren't good enough to cut it on the weekend. So when we go into the European level, are they going to be good enough? I don't want to write any player off. Some people didn't think Greg Taylor was good enough for European football, and I think he's proven a lot of players, fans rather, wrong in that respect. K Matsu, I can hook you up with some venues in Japan. Listen, we would definitely get on the road to come to Japan. Kevin McCluskey, our very own Kevin McCluskey, is setting up an Acsom night in Hungary. We'll go anywhere. If there's a group of Celtic fans, a decent venue, we'll bring the player and host the night. Red Scotland, any more bragging rights, and we'll need to invent a fourth cup. The three we have are filled to the brim. No, you're right. I mean, listen, Ailey Barber's a St Johnstone fan, and like you said earlier, Stephen, I think she's very good. I think she's one of our better pundits, but it was probably out there before she could do anything with it, and we will jump on that absolutely every single time. Now, we've said, regardless of who it is, by the way, we've said before that when you win, lose or draw, it's always important to highlight any poor performances rather of the officials, Stephen, right? And by the way, you and I have already accepted we were well beaten at the weekend. We could have done so much better. Yeah, there was individual errors. Celtic weren't at the races at the weekend. So that's the first point I would make. We're not saying it was because of bad refereeing. It absolutely wasn't. But when I look at some of the decisions, one of the ones today, during the game, I was aware that Cantwell seemed to be getting away with murder. So looking at it today, I was able to actually look at that in more detail. There was 5 occasions where he was penalised for fouling our players. First one happened on 12 minutes with Hatate. There was a few on Hatate, one on O'Reilly, one on Kobayashi, one on Jota. He went through the entire game, didn't get a booking. And then 59 minutes in, if you rewatch McGregor, booked for barely touching Sakala on the touchline. Unbelievable booking. Mm-hmm. And that level of inconsistency is frustrating. And we're not doing it because it's sour grapes and all that kind of stuff, Stephen. There was a few other things. I think Jack had Bernabe in a headlock 40 minutes in. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened. People were asking about whether or not Suter impeded Kobayashi. We've discussed that. I don't think he did. I think Kobayashi was just out-muscled on that one. And then, of course, you've got the goals and handball. We spoke about that at the weekend, and some people in the comments were saying, you don't know the handball rule. I've been looking through the handball rule all morning. And, with regards to using your arm to support your body, for example, that's, I think, when your body's already on the ground. He went body and arm to ball. It's probably the only thing that we could argue the toss about, Stephen, to be honest with you. But again, it's a refereeing decision that we expect in games like this.
Yeah, I think that's what you're expecting when Stephen McLean's the referee. I don't think anyone's in any doubt where his allegiances lie. But, I agree with you. The Cantwell non-booking was farcical given the amount of fouls he committed in the game. He was obviously trying to achieve a Majid Bugera when you remember that game where he kicked Robbie Keane up and down the park?
Yep.
He must have committed at least 8 bookable offences, and I think he got booked in the last 5 minutes of the game or something. And he committed enough offences to get sent off 3 times, but never get sent off at all. So that it was similar to that, maybe not quite as pronounced with Cantwell. They were never going to book him. He's the great white hope for next season for Rangers. He's the poster boy. He's the man who thinks he's this great player and he's going to be a superstar and all this nonsense. So he was never going to get booked. Whatever he done on the park, he was never going to get booked. On the Goldson handball, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on the handball rule. It seems to change so often now. I'm not quite sure what it is. But for me, it's a penalty. I've read all the arguments like yourself about I'm supporting his own weight, but he wasn't. You're right. He was on his way down and he reached his arm out to make contact with the ball. And for me, it's a penalty. And it didn't even get looked at by VAR. But given what we've seen already this season, I don't suppose we should be too surprised with that.
I think it gets highlighted hugely if it's a 1-0 defeat after the game, and we'll really then focus on it. But yeah, it's important to raise these issues, and the Cantwell one was just bizarre. As I said earlier, Stephen, Rangers fans were cheering for Raskin kicking the ball at the park, and we've heard of the Espanyolification of Rangers, why they actually believe that these 3 points are as important as 3 trophies. And that's one thing that I can take away from this, and I'm pretty glad that is their attitude. If they truly believe that was acceptable over a season, just to get a win against Celtic. I go back to the 95 game at Hampden, where we beat them 3-0. You'll remember it. Mm-hmm. Van Hooijdonk, Vata, and an OG by Craig Moore, I think it was. Billy Thompson was in goals for Rangers that day. It meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. It was just, it was good on the day. It was great to beat Rangers. And as Kevin Graham said on the blog, they went into the summer months and signed Basil Bowley and Paul Gascoigne. It meant absolutely nothing in the great scheme of things. That result there, as long as we maintain our own goals and we continue with the recruitment strategy that we have, that will mean nothing. But their expectations now, Stephen, are so low that a win against Celtic and a meaningless in terms of the title race fixture keeps them happy. Then I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, that shows the level they're at just now. They're clinging on to anything, and they were always going to cling on to this result if they got it. But, they're not any further forward than they were last week or the week before when we beat them. They're still at the same level, and a win over a weakened Celtic side doesn't change that at all. They've still got this massive rebuilding job to do in the summer. And if they start next season with Fascist Sakala up front, playing centre forward for them, then I'll be laughing hilariously because, if they think that's good enough, and if they think John Souttar's good enough to play at centre half for them through a whole season against a full-strength Celtic team, then I'm delighted. I'm delighted with that because we'll tear them apart like we have done in the past, and we will do again when we've got a full team in the park, strengthened over the summer, as we know Ange will, and with a renewed vigour next season.
And when there's pressure, when it matters, that's when we've got that's when we've managed to get the results. Pete McGee actually says, if we're honest, we need to ask why we've played so badly against them in recent derbies, despite the positive results, not just on Saturday. And that's the thing, when it's mattered, I don't think we have always played that well, but we've always managed to get the results. I think the big difference at the weekend was we were without 4 first team or first choices. We weren't without them. 2 forced, 2 were made by Ange. And it definitely showed. There was a drop in quality. A quarter of our team, were out that you would expect to see, and it definitely showed. And despite all of that, watching it back today, I think there were 4 chances where we could have scored in this game. We've already discussed the O chance where he hits the post. 15 minutes in, Abada's on the 12. He's on the penalty spot. And I think Ralston plays a brilliant zipped cross in. Abada's got to do better. That's a chance. 42 minutes, O'Reilly, chance of the game, potentially. He does so well, by the way. You've got to say, O'Reilly does so well to create the chance out of nothing. And yeah, it was a good save, but, he's got to, so that was 49 minutes. He's got to score that for me. And there was another one from O'Reilly that I think was a chance from a Ralston cross as well. So we had the chances and we weren't decisive enough as well, Stephen. So you've got to take that away and say, listen, on another day, we could have came away from that saying, listen, we were rubbish today, but we got a result.
Yeah, for sure. They were all, really half-decent chances. I wouldn't say they were gimmies, but, they were all good chances. And O'Reilly especially has to do better. And a bad out, it was just that I don't think he got a hold of it properly. It was a bit of a miss kick. I think it came on his weaker side. But, we just have to take our medicine, to be honest. We came out on the wrong side of the game. We had our chances. We can point to reasons why we didn't play well, and these are all valid reasons. They're not excuses. They're valid reasons why we didn't show up on the day. But ultimately, we didn't deserve to win. We didn't deserve to take anything from the game. And I'm just happy that we reserved that type of performance for a game that didn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, pass marks then. I've got them down here, Stephen. I've got 3 players that, having watched it back again, once the emotions kind of out of the equation, I think O'Reilly gets pass marks for me. I think that he was the type of player who was going to create something, and he did get into goal-scoring positions. Unfortunately, the 2 chances he had, he didn't score them. I thought Jota, despite the fact he was switching left and right, I still thought Jota played well. He obviously had a weakness behind him, but I still thought he was always willing to show for the ball. He was trying to create something out of nothing. And despite that final goal, I think Starfelt played pretty well as well. They're the 3 players for me, Stephen, that get pass marks on that game.
Yeah, I thought Starfelt was outstanding, apart from that mistake, which I think was probably more to do with McGregor than Starfelt. I would put more of the blame of that on Callum McGregor. I think he made a bad back pass to Starfelt when he should have been looking up the park. And Ange talks about them being brave enough to make difficult passes, and I thought he just tried to take the easy option, and it ended up in just a complete mess. But apart from that, I thought Starfelt was very strong in the tackle. He won all his headers, won all his defensive duels, and I thought he was our best player. Jota, you're right, was good offensively. He looked as if he was able to create. He was able to go past players, but the defensive side of the game just wasn't there from him. O'Reilly, again, yes, got himself in good positions, but the lack of a finish is something we've seen from O'Reilly this season. Mm-hmm. He should be scoring more goals than he does. And that's something he probably needs to address in the close season. But he got himself into good positions, and he'll learn a lot from that game.
Yeah, it seems to take him an age this season to get off the mark with his goals. And we spoke to Morten Vikhorst earlier on, and we asked him about his chances of a full cap for Denmark. He says, listen, he's on our radar. He's a player that we really like, but it's tough to get into that full international squad. You add goals to his game, Stephen, and that takes his game up another level. Matt O'Reilly. John McGlinchey, thanks for joining the show. You're commenting on YouTube. Paul John, we are nowhere near being a European force with these players and our style of playing. Well, I want to see us next season. I want to see us when you've got that galvanisation of the team we currently have, some of whom will be in their second season, so you might be seeing a better version of them. And then hopefully, and I think crucially, also aided and abetted by 3 or 4 top quality signings in the summer as well. Brian Walsh, apart from the 4-0 game at Parkhead, we either beat them by the odd goal, drew or lost. Talk of a gap is pure complacency. We can't fall into that trap this summer. Brian, I'm going to say 2 words to you, Jim Orr. He's been saying this all season, and every time he says it, he gets criticised about the gap. I think between the 2 clubs, the gap is absolutely massive. But at the weekend, what we did see is 4 first picks out. The gap isn't that big, is it? And that's something that we really need to be concerned about. Chris McCafferty, fireworks going off in Wishaw after the game. I couldn't believe that's where their high standards have got to. Get suits and brown brogues out. Well, listen, if they're setting off the fireworks because they've beaten us in a game that has no bearing on where that league trophy goes, then let them fill their brown brogues. Let them fill their boots. There's been a new kit leaked today, and I can only say, Stephen, if Adidas are leaking new kits, I'm pretty sure the Celtic marketing team will not be very happy with them. We've seen a set of green and white hoops doing the rounds on the socials. Apparently, it's legit, but it's not going to be our home kit. So work that one out. And then the new one that I seen this morning was an away or a third jersey. kind of two-tone green with a pattern on it. Got to say, it looks pretty smart to me. I do like it. But it begs the question again, why you got a green away kit? Because, any games you can't wear your home kit, you're not going to be able to wear that one. Oh, yeah, we'll bring out another one. So it looks as though we're going to have 4 kits again next season, Stephen. Is that overkill for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's clearly just a marketing ploy, to try and get some more pounds. And I mean, my views on away kits are we should always have one dark, either black or dark green away kit, and one yellow, and that covers any potential kit clash in any of the other clubs in Scotland. You bring in a white, either a white or a late green or anything like that, it's far too close to our home kit to be any use in any meaningful way in terms of kit clashes. The one I seen today, like I don't hate it. It's quite a nice kit. It looked probably more like a training kit to me than an actual third kit. But I don't hate it. I'd like to see it. See how they pair it up, shorts and socks wise, before I make a final judgment on it. But I really do like the home kit that's been floated around, or what they said was the home kit. And if that's not going to be the home kit, then I'd say that's probably quite disappointing.
Yeah, from what I've heard, it's a commemorative kit. And we are going to have another set of green and white hoops. Thankfully, it is the hoops. There was talk when Nike were involved in designing their kits that they were going to do away with the hoops, which was met with the kind of reaction you would expect. Why on earth have I got this behind me? That's because, I'm wondering, would it look good on Jota? Probably. However, if you think that Stephen's kits are better than mine, give us a thumbs up on the YouTube. Player of the Year awards last night. There was a couple of awards ceremonies, and Manager of the Year, Postecoglou, Goal of the Season, Jota against Rangers, where he, I thought it was a great pass by O'Reilly, actually, and then he rounds McGregor, slots it away. And PFA Player of the Year, we won 2 gongs. Kyogo and Caitlin Hayes both won the PFA Player of the Year. The Celtic gongs went to Kyogo as Young Player of the Year went to Matt O'Reilly. And that leads us into the women's team, actually, because, it's all gone down to the wire. Steve, I'm going to ask you one question about this. So Celtic beat Hibs 2-1 at Meadowbank, and I've seen a few pictures from the game. I wasn't there yesterday. I did see some images. Natasha Meikle was at the game, and it was that running track around Meadowbank, Thistle's old stadium. And I remember when I was at school, primary school, they used to take us there and force us to run round that. Now, by the way, looking at it as a 45-year-old, it looks big enough. I think I was about 9 at the time. It took me about 3 days. Now Celtic are looking for a win in their final game against Hearts. It's a home tie. And Rangers are playing Glasgow City. What we're hoping for is that they draw. Now, Rangers have already announced that they're going to be moving their game to Ibrox. We've seen how big an impact that we had at Celtic Park for the last game that we played against Glasgow City at home. Should our game against Hearts be switched to Celtic Park? Should the season ticket holders be able to go in for Nout? Should we get the Green Brigade and the Ultras and everything going again for the last game? It's bound to make a difference, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. The game against Glasgow City last week that was moved to Celtic Park, the atmosphere there looked phenomenal. And credit to the Green Brigade and the boys for getting that organised. And yeah, I'd be all for that. Get it moved to as many of the women's games as possible should be played at Celtic Park to try and get the atmosphere. We should be striving for excellence, whatever team we put in the park. And in the women's game, we should be striving to be the best team in the country. And that should be the expectation. So anything we can do as a club to help that, we should certainly do. And if that means getting the games to Celtic Park, getting a big crowd in, give out free tickets if you need to, get the atmosphere going. And I'm sure Rangers, like they always do, they're just following in our footsteps, really, by moving their game to Ibrox. And let's hope that the results go in our favour. And it'd be great to finish with the Women's League title to add to ours.
It would be brilliant, a great advert. And I know that obviously we were speaking last week about the first game that they ever played, and how far they've come since then. I think we've got a manager in Fran Alonso who has bought into the ethos of Celtic. He's also then bought into the ethos of Ange Postecoglou. And I found Ange's post-match comments really interesting. I was thinking in the last 10, 15 minutes, when nothing much was happening in the game, Stephen, I'm thinking to myself, what's Ange going to say after this game? Because, you know, it was a bit of a damp squib by the end of the game. We were well beaten. And, you know, they were going to kind of going through the motions, Rangers, by that point. And I've watched 2 or 3 interviews. I've watched the club interview and also the one that he gave to the larger kind of media outlets. And he was talking about these players don't get a freebie. So he's talking about guys that are going into that game. He actually referenced, and I'm supposedly... I'm thinking it's probably the Johnston situation where he's thrown a player in previously and he's done the job, and that's what he was expecting. And he expected them to get the job done, and they didn't. I found that really interesting. What can we take from Ange's post-match comments, do you think, Stephen?
I think the main thing I took from him was he was absolutely furious. He was really annoyed. He could hardly look the interviewer in the eye. He was just there on the ground. He was, you know, so sort of downbeat in what he was saying. He was clearly getting ready to tear strips off of someone, and I really wouldn't have liked to have been one of those players in the dressing room after he delivered a spray, because he wasn't happy, and he clearly didn't think that performance was up to the standard that he expects from any player, whether it's their first game or their 100th game. Their standards to maintain, and we fell well below them at the weekend, and he won't be happy about that. And I think probably he'll be looking at his own part in it as well, and he's probably, you know, angry that he made so many changes, and he'll be, you know, I think that's probably why he was a little bit annoyed.
Mm-hmm. Aye, definitely. And this is a big thing, you know, with Ange, certainly you've got a confidence that he'll identify what went wrong and put it right. That's the big thing that I've got with Ange. I'm confident that he can do that. And I think that we've covered quite a lot today, Stephen. I've got to thank you for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind. You, of course, appear on a regular basis on Celtic Down Under. If you haven't already followed the guys on social media, do that. Subscribe to them on YouTube as well. And there's been a wee bit of chat about us going to Japan and Ireland. We're already setting up a gig in Hungary, but we do regular events in Scotland, and there's one in Glasgow in a couple of weeks' time where we will be with wee Jackie. Jackie McNamara will be joining us at Gracie's. There are some tickets available. I think about maybe 8 or 9 VIP tickets available. If you want to meet wee Jackie and get your photograph taken and get a signed item as well, then the tickets are underneath this video. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. 900 strong on the live stream this afternoon. Yes, it was a poor performance, but we've got loads to look forward to, starting off with a full house against St Mirren this weekend. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. And thank you to Stephen also for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.